Sounds good. Um, my name's Collin. I got sober May 11th, 2011. Um, got sober in my early 20s. Yeah, I guess I'll give a little background on that. I drank right from the get-go pretty heavily and pretty violently. I never really could keep it together in any way, shape, or form. I was always kind of a mess. Always would black out, get into fights, walk through the woods. I was the kind of guy that I'd be at a party and then I would disappear and I would black out and just walk into the woods, walk in other people's houses, wake up in other people's houses. Just weird shit. I don't know. It just right from the start, that's how it was. I mean, I grew up kind of out in the woods in Western Mass, on the Vermont border. So most of my drinking and drug use was in the woods. So yeah, that was just right from the start, pretty much just weird and dangerous and just unsettling things started to happen when I drank. And it was funny at first, just funny coming to and waking up in somebody else's house or doing some weird shit and making jokes about it. But yeah, I mean, I got sober in my early 20s. But drinking was that was the first thing for me that was clearly a problem. It was probably the most destructive, to be honest. I mean, I got into other stuff, but that's the one that scares me more than anything. I've been on dopey, telling my stories a few times. I guess it's kind of weird being in one of these meetings, because I have such a regimented how I tell my story now in AA. Don't really get into any war stories, so it's almost it's weird for me to and to not have Chris or Dave prompt it and pry it out of me. So yeah, I guess I'll tell a few around the drinking. I mean, I got one of the dopey episodes is me. I got my only DUI, stealing a golf cart. I was in college and on the rugby team, and that was just a disaster for a heavy drinker. I just drank around the clock constantly. I didn't even go to class. Lived at the rugby house, drank nonstop, did coke. One Friday afternoon, I was drinking at my house, and then I blacked out. I came to 10 miles away on this lake house, this off-campus house, and there's a big party, and a drug bust happened in the middle of it. And I had no idea where I was. I had no shoes, and I didn't have a shirt. The guy that owned the house was selling coke, and they busted him. So everybody ran out, and I hid under a log for what I felt like 2 hours until I thought the coast was clear. And then I came back. I was 19 at the time. I came back and immediately got detained and given a underage drinking ticket or whatever. And then they arrested me. But they put me in the twisty ties, and they had too many people that they had detained. So as soon as the guy looked the other way, I ran off into this neighborhood in the middle of Vermont in the dark, shimmying my way out of the twisty ties, and then bounced around to a few other people's houses that seemed to have gatherings. Quickly was told to leave because I was covered in dirt. And it was cold. It was in November, and I was shirtless and shoeless, and I found my way into a campground and ended up trying to stay warm. I broke into this storage shed, and there's all this Halloween decorations, and there was like this deflated pumpkin that I just like wrapped myself in and like slept for a couple of hours. But then woke up and I was still cold, and I looked around the storage shed, found a golf cart with keys in it, and was like, in like all seriousness, like the plan was I was just going to drive back to where I lived in the golf cart, and I would stay on the side of the road so I wouldn't get pulled over. Made about 100 yards down the road, flipped the golf cart into a drainage ditch, and then woke up in handcuffs the next morning. So yeah, I charged with grand larceny, DUI. So yeah, that was like just one of many. Like that was like one of my dopey drinking stories. Yeah, and the drinking just got worse and worse, and like the not so funny stories of like hurting people and getting arrested more often, just doing stupid shit, starting to lose stuff. Kicked out of school, drove my car into their sign. They had like a manhunt out for me, like trying to figure out, well, it wasn't really a manhunt. I like left my car and then hid out for 5 days and they found me. Yeah, so all the while, like I was just drinking, like doing mushrooms, acid, like Vermont college type stuff. I hated people that did opiates. There's a bunch of guys in here that know me, but that's like kind of the crux of my story is like my whole family was just like riddled with addiction. Family owned pharmacies, uncles kicked out of the family business for like embezzling money, stealing drugs. Mom was just in and out of rehab my whole life. She's in there now, actually. Yeah, I just hated people that did opiates. If I saw it, I would like let you know that while being like incredibly intoxicated and like clearly had a problem of my own. So didn't want to look at that. So I'd blame the people that were, in my perception, doing harder stuff. And I was going to school to be a pharmacist. Had experience as a pharmacy tech, and I got kicked out of school. Went home immediately. Like, mom got out of rehab, learned about like enabling and being around like positive influences, and her son clearly wasn't a positive influence for her own sobriety. So I got kicked out pretty quick out of the house and just kind of bounced around trying to figure shit out. Ended up calling my uncle, who had gotten kicked out of the business for stealing a lot of money, other things. I reached out to him, and I knew he was running pharmacies up in Vermont, and I asked him for a job. He gave me a job. So kicked out of school, still drinking problem was very apparent, didn't have a license. The job was an hour away, so put on my lab coat and illegally drove my car every single morning for 8 a.m. to the compounding pharmacy that I was to be working at through the back road so I didn't get pulled over. And that like brought a ton of anxiety. And one day, just counting pills day in, day out, I just like flipped one in my lab coat pocket because I didn't want to be. I was like, I don't know, being young and like having a drinking problem, like that was, heard of people going to rehab for drugs. I hadn't gotten into heavy drugs yet, and like, I don't know, it was hard for me to like wrap my head around that like drinking was like fucking me up pretty bad. So I flipped it was like a Valium or Xanax or something like that in my pocket, and took that, and I felt good going home. I wasn't that worried about getting pulled over. And like had this like sick and twisted belief that I could like fix my drinking with benzos, because I could like, I don't know, it just seemed more controllable in pill form, and it wasn't at all. That just like, and I kind of like skip over like this part when I usually tell my story, but like it was the process of doing that was, the amount of stress of stealing from a pharmacy for 2 years, the amount of things that I stole just brought more anxiety than I had even making that decision to, like I had a lot of anxiety prior from my drinking, but like doing that every single day, and like the methods that I did, I was just stealing stuff so I could cure myself of the anxiety of stealing things. It was just like this crazy cycle. Like the entire day was just wrapped around like certain methods, like fudging numbers on refills, messing around with insurance. Every morning I would look at the obituaries and look up customers that I knew were like regulars that were I knew the people that were about to die, because you can tell the type of meds that they get when they're about to die. And I would wait for the obituary to hit, find out that they're dead, and hit all the refills before claiming them deceased in the system. And then fill it out in the computer system that their families picked it up, and like wouldn't put any money in the drawer for it. And then there'd be like a whole thing, like I knew like how it works, or they're like going to bill for this dead person, but they're never going to get it back, and they kind of like let it go. And like that was my system, and it worked extremely well. And immediately, like that just opened the door for everything else. That opened the door for it was like Vicodin for a while. I was like snorting Vicodin. Like I didn't have anybody, like I was around, like at this point I'm bouncing from couch to couch, from place to place, putting on my lab coat every single morning. It's a mess. But like as long as I put that lab coat on, I was somebody else. My friends all around me were starting to do heroin, and I just wouldn't let them know what I was doing. And I like for a while I was just doing Vicodin and benzos, and I just like couldn't bring myself to anything else. But like that lasted about a month. Like couldn't get the Vicodin, so Percocet, Oxy, morphine sulfate pill form, and then the fentanyl patches. And then I'd chop the fentanyl patches up into 6x6 squares and put them in like dip. And that was like, there's a lot of different shit that I did. And I like try, like there was like cocaine eye drops that were like a thing for like post surgery. Did some of that. There's like liquid THC for cancer patients to help for their eating. Like that was like for whatever reason, that was like part of like, that was like a controlled substance before things became like legalized. Did that, but I just like really like Oxy 80s and the fentanyl patches. That was like kind of my wheelhouse. So I did that for a while. I tried shooting morphine, and I woke up 15 hours later and thought I was dead. And I tried that a few times, and I stopped. And I was too afraid to ask like people that I knew that were shooting dope to like help me out with that. And it was like one of those things, like pride things. Like I'm not gonna mix that up. I'm not gonna. And I was also like fearful of like people finding out that I'm getting this stuff, like, and like asking me for some favors and people knowing about it. So I kept it pretty close to the vest for a while. And I mean, that like brought, I should have been in prison for what I did. That's the reality. But like there was a few times I'd gotten pulled over and I had people's scripts with pills in them. I got pulled over for like a taillight out. There's one time up in New Hampshire, a taillight out, and I got caught. Like I had like 3 different people's prescriptions in my back seat, and they're like, "What the fuck is this?" And arrested for possession, and then I was able to somehow snake my way out of that by saying I was like also a delivery driver, which I was kind of, and that they must have fallen out of the bag. So like just a lot of close calls. And like when the DEA would come for the audits, that was scary. That was really scary. Like walking in the morning and them just showing up, like you didn't know when they were going to show up, and like I'd be still using in the bathroom while they were there to like make sure that I was right so they didn't suspect anything. So yeah, that happened for a while. And the day that I stopped working at that pharmacy was the day that I had like dabbled in selling some stuff. And I was at this kid's house that I was living with, and he threw a party. And he was like just this like middleman dude, like just kind of like he wasn't like in it to make. He was just scraping off the top type of deal. He wasn't like fully like trying to deal anything, but like just trying to get by. And like he got mixed up in something and owed somebody a bunch of money, and scraping a little too much off the top. And in the middle of this party, he like went up to me. He was like, "Hey, like there's these guys that are giving me a hard time, and like I owe them like $20. It's not a big deal, but if they show up, like do you have my back?" And at that point, I was off of work, super fucked up, and like in my like mode of drinking, of just wanting to like fight any chance I could get. And I told him I'm ready for whatever happens, and nothing happens until like 3:30 in the morning. One of those like end of party, like girls in the kitchen, like drunkenly like cooking up ramen. I'm like passed out in a chair next to the kitchen, and he's like up in his room with somebody, and most of the people are gone. And then all of a sudden, like shit hit the fan, and the girl starts shaking me, and I came to, and there was a bunch of guys outside the house, like trying to kick the door in. And I don't know, I just like when you wake me up from like being passed out or like in like a blackout stupor, I just like my brain is shut off, and I'm just like in this like fight or flight type of mode. And I just like immediately just started like pushing these guys and like kicking them, and they jumped me, and I tried like running up the stairs to like grab my friends, and they shoved me, and I went right through the glass window of the second floor, and right into the bushes. As I was trying to like catch myself as I fell back, I sliced my wrist open and all the veins in my wrist. And they freaked out. They thought they killed me, so they all like jumped in their car and left, and I just like bled out. And and I woke up in the hospital like a few days, like a day and a half later, and my family was there, and it was the first time I'd seen them in a while. And I don't know, it was like that's when I like started going to AA meetings, and I hated it. It was weird. I like went to these meetings, and it was like backwoods, like redneck meetings, and they were like immediately the guys. They were like, "Did you see who did it? Like who pushed you? Like you know their names?" And like I knew their names, but I'm like, they're like, we'll take care of it for you. And that was like my first true personal experience of AA. Of like, oh, like I guess like that's how it works. Like there's no like amends process. There's just like revenge process. And I don't know. I didn't give names or anything like that. I just didn't want any trouble, because I was like, those guys were like messaging me a bunch, trying to like find me. I don't fucking know. I drank that night when they did that, and blackout again, ripped my stitches out with my teeth. And I just kept going. I didn't go back to the job. I don't know. Like I just like didn't have the balls to like tell them what happens. I couldn't really like look my uncle in the eyes, and like, I don't know, felt pretty broken at that point. But I still had a habit I had to keep up with, and luckily my family owns pharmacies, but I wasn't going to be working there. So I could just steal from the delivery vans. I just wait across the park and wait for the delivery vans to pull up for their morning orders for the hospice kits. And as soon as the delivery driver would go in, I would run into the back, I'd rip open the kits, and I'd find whatever I could get. And hopefully it was something good. And that was what I did for a while. And I'd sell a little bit so I could buy booze and buy food. And then I was still like bouncing around from house to house. And then eventually like I was enough of a disaster. It was causing enough problems that like nobody wanted to be around me. And I ended up homeless in the woods for like the last bit. And like through all this was just like attempts at sobriety or like just like getting out of the situation I was in, like IOP. Like I tried going up to the Brattleboro retreat, and it's like it was right after I went through the window, and they like thought I was suicidal. They didn't believe me that I like fell through a window. They saw the like slit wrists, and they're like, I don't know. They like wouldn't let me in, and I just like used that and was like, nobody can help me. So, and then I was like, with the hospice kits, I wasn't getting what I wanted all the time, so I would just snort anything that I possibly could. I would snort like chemo meds, and then that's where like weird like delusional stuff would happen. Be like in the woods, like seeing shit and like drinking and like having this like out of body experiences and like really leaning into the living in the woods part. Like my mom is like pretty outdoorsy, and she used to like teach me how to string together a fishing pole and set up traps. And like I was doing that, like caught a few like perch and like threw them on the fire, like descaled them and like ate them. I didn't like have much of an appetite at that point, but I was like trying to like will my way into this like new form of living of like survivalist, like, cause that's what it was. Not the fact that I was this like piece of shit drug addict that was stealing hospice kits from people that are dying. I was a survivalist. So I don't know. One day I couldn't do it anymore. I had gotten thrown out of a bar or something. It was either a bar or like some type of fight. And I fucked my shoulder up pretty bad, and I was like pretty emaciated. I was like 130 pounds, and I was seeing shit from what I was snorting out my nose. And I went and I asked my mom for help. I hadn't talked to her in a while. She was about a year sober. And and then I ended up in treatment in Connecticut, lied to them about the drugs. I like mostly kind of detoxed myself off in the woods. I just like drank vodka and tried to be blackout as much as I could during that, and that wasn't like great. And I realized my shoulder was fucked up because I wasn't on anything, and I realized I had a broken collarbone. But I ended up at treatment, and I lied, and they realized that because I was like a fucking mess. I said I was just drinking, and I wasn't drinking that much. So they sent me to the hospital, found out about the collarbone, found out that I was like doing lots of opiates, and like finished like kind of detoxing there. I was there for like 2 days, and then they sent me back. And and so I ended up there and didn't know like what was going to happen. It was warm and there was food, and people felt bad for me. My family felt bad for me. My mom bought me a carton of cigarettes, and that was like the most like positive communication that I had with my mom in a while. So good things were happening. But I still felt like shit. Was in this group with this counselor who like only took men and only apparently took like the worst people. And like I didn't feel like I was the worst. I was young, and like I sat there, didn't talk for a few days, and like I started to like get to know the guys that were in there, and they were fucked up. They were really fucked up. And there's one guy in there with like a pink sock and a black sock and like a white t-shirt, oversized sweatpants, and like the counselor hated him. just hated him. He was just like, you like every single time he was always so sarcastic and like just like didn't give a fuck. And the counselor just kept threatening to send him to some like nunnery up in or like some like nun run rehab up in northern New York, and he was like, do whatever you gotta do. And that was Chris. That was Chris from Dopey. Yeah, and I like was baffled by this kid. Like he just like, I don't know, he just like has like, he just didn't give a fuck, but he did in some ways. He was like always like super afterwards he was like super friendly, like asking me. He was like very curious about like my story, and at that point like I wasn't talking about the pharmacies. I wasn't like going into any of that. I was still afraid I was going to get in trouble. And somehow like he just like got me to like tell him stuff. He had a way about him that like just this like openness to him that got me to like tell him some things, and I did. And then the next day he fucking outed me to the counselor. They like he was taking the heat again, and he's like, you keep yelling at me, this kid's over here lying to you about the fact that he's stealing from pharmacies for the past few years. Why don't you talk to him? Why don't you send him up to where you're trying to send me? And that was like, he fucked me. Like at the moment I was just like, you gotta be kidding me. And then like right after that, the counselor's like, we need to talk. Like it says that you're here just for drinking. And like clearly from like your medical stay, like there's other stuff, and like you need to talk about it now. And like, so to sit down with him and like go over every single detail about like what I stole, what I took, how I did it. And he like wrote it all down. And he was like, he was this like former like Hell's Angel, like, I don't know. I don't know if he was like a probation officer or something like that, but he like took it back. He probably lied to me, but he like took it back. And he's like, I'm going to let like my like law enforcement friends know. He's like, I'm not going to out you or anything. I just want to know like how much time that would be. And he came back and he's like, you would have done over a decade if like you got caught. And then some like scared straight shit. And yeah, so that was like the start of mine and Chris's friendship. With him outing me. And yeah, so I met him and I met Dave, and we would just sit on the porch at Mountainside, and Dave would play his guitar, and he'd sing, and we'd just tell stories and just shoot the shit. And yeah, Chris and I ended up going to sober living together. Lived there for, well, he was only there for like 3 months. Then he moved to this sober living down the road and started working at the needle factory. And me and Ted, this other guy, we like had this plan one day. Like we were going to go to another sober living, but we're like, what if me, you, and Chris just got a place? And like we asked Chris about it, and Chris' parents were freaked out that he was moving again. And so he was like mandated to like stay at that one place for 6 months. So Ted and I had to ride it out the place we were at, like to wait it out for Chris. And we finally like got the go ahead from Chris's parents that he could leave. We also, Ted and I couldn't afford an apartment, just the two of us. So we needed Chris. Yeah. So we lived together there, and yeah, the journey kind of like continued with like that friendship. And yeah, I mean, I've told, I don't know, like how you've probably listened to so many different dopey stories, but the story of like Chris ended up back at like he lived with us, and then he like went to Brooklyn to like manage a sober house, and then he like relapsed in Brooklyn, and then ended up back at our apartment reunited, but he was all fucked up on like acid and drinking, and like was like showed up at he got dropped off at our house after like all these crazy escapades, and was like trying to get us to go to Mohegan Sun to like bet all of our money on roulette, and it's like just like funny, easygoing Chris, but all fucked up. And then it just got dark. It just like he like stood in the kitchen and was like, what if I just like slit my wrist right now? What are you guys gonna do? And like we had to call the cops on him, and that was like one of the hardest things I had to do. And he just like kept looking at me. He's like, you say you're friends. And I'm like, well, wheeled off her to the drunk tank. And then we took him to treatment the next day. I don't know. And Chris had been in my life. Like, he did his own thing and went off to school, but he played a major role in my recovery up until today. I'm actually in Boston right now. I just walked right by where he grew up, and when we went to Mike's Pastries tonight, and Chris and I always used to go there, and we actually went there, or we were right around there about like a couple days before he died. So it's just weird. It's like weird that this fell on like being in Boston, and I'm speaking on his podcast that we used to give him shit all the time about that it was a bad idea and it was going to suck and nobody's going to listen to it. So he's probably laughing now that it's like, it's what it is. Yeah, so today, I guess, like, bring it back to like the AA kind of format here. Like today, 9 years sober, and a lot's happened in that time. A lot of like pretty fucking amazing things. Definitely some really fucked up things, but I don't know. It's the lens that I see the world of. Like, I think it started in the beginning of like not taking myself so seriously, not taking my. It's not just like not taking my problems so seriously, but like dropping it down a level that I'm not so stuck in like shame and guilt and like frozen by like who I thought I was and who I thought other people thought I was, and just like removing that veneer. It's like what Chris did for me, and what like I'm sure Dopey does for a lot of other people. It makes it easier to talk about some really fucked up things that's really hard to talk to other people in everyday life about. So that it kind of lowered my guard with that, and like allowed me to get vulnerable, allowed me to like talk about really difficult things, and to like go through them. Like, it starts with talking about them, and then the going through them is going to be painful. But if I can like voice those things while I'm walking through them, talking the talk and walking the walk, that's gotten me here today. Some fucked up things happen all the time. I mean, I found my mom like 3 weeks ago in her apartment on an air mattress. She's paralyzed. She's drinking vodka around the clock with pills all around her, and had to get her into treatment. And I don't know. It's just like that stuff's going to keep happening. And like people like Chris, like may not, like the other Chris's in my life, like may not be here forever. And I don't know that, and I can't predict that. And I can like cherish the time that I have with everybody, and build a life, and try to, and build a life despite the things that are thrown at me each and every day. And I've done that, and I've been able to thrive in that. And that's with a lot of help and a lot of hand-holding through, walking through the fire. Yeah, and my life's pretty amazing today. Got a 3-year-old son. I work with a bunch of my best friends, running a sober living up here, and just doing a bunch of fun shit all the time. Yeah, getting a puppy tomorrow, and yeah, maybe stopping by and seeing Chris on the way back. So I try to do that as much as I can when I'm up here in Boston. Just say hi to him, and he's buried next to one of the Kennedys. How fucked up is that? He's like right across from like JFK's dad. Like, what? I just thought I'd throw that in there. Every time I go there, I'm just like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. So I know I probably spoke a little too much, but I just want to throw a lot of stuff in there in a short amount of time. But I appreciate Mike. Thanks for letting me speak, and thank you all for being here.
It's the weight of the world pulling down on your life when you feel like you're waiting patiently. trying to survive. There's a moment when you stop thinking to yourself, I gotta get over this, I need some help. And shout it out like the rhythm in a song, and then the vibrations keep you rolling on strong. Relax and dream one day at a time. Let the beauty of the music start to heal your life. Heal your life.